What's up, my friend? Welcome back to another video. And today, I just wanted to tackle a really important question that I think every composer has asked at a certain point, or orchestrator, I should say, and that is how many instruments is actually enough for my arrangement? Even that question, I hope you can relate. I certainly ask myself that all the time. It's like, is there really enough to make the arrangement complete? And so we're going to answer that by asking one very specific question, which I'll share with you in just a second. But before we do that, I want to give you complete free access to my on-demand video workshop called the Complete Composer's Framework. This is a workshop I recorded a little while ago, going over my complete step-by-step process from finding your initial idea to the polished master. And I'll show you everything in between, how to write great melodies and harmonies, how to find the right structure for your piece, how to orchestrate, make my mixing and mastering formula, plus my virtual orchestration roadmap, which is something I follow every single time for my mockups. It's jam-packed full of value, and I want to give it to you completely free. So if you click the first link in the box below, you can get access to that, and I hope it's super valuable to you because I know it's helped a lot of my students so far, and I know it can do the same for you as well. So let's kind of dive into that question. How many instruments is enough? I think what I'll do quickly is share with you the very first A section, and then we'll go into the A prime, listen to the ensemble version of that theme, and then we'll cut it off and talk about that answer. Okay, so let's have a quick listen. All right, let's cut it off there. So first of all, let me ask you the contrast. What do you hear in terms of the difference in terms of instrumentation between the first A section and the second A section? Well, the obvious answer is the correct answer. The first section has very few instruments, 2 to be exact, until the second half. And then when the full 2D orchestra comes in, everything seems to come in, right? But both sections seem to make sense in themselves. And the reason for that is because the question I'm asking myself is, are there any holes? Those 4 words, very, very important. Are there any holes? And by holes, what I'm looking for is holes in the frequency spectrum. So if you imagine, the orchestra is a color palette, right? There's high instruments, there's low instruments, there's mid instruments, and every one of those instruments has their own unique color as well, the woodwinds being the most prime example. The strings have a more homogeneous sound, and the brass have a pretty homogeneous sound as well, but they have a very big timbral range as well. But that just goes to show the power of colors in the orchestra and also the ranges of those different instruments as well. So from the very, very lows like the tuba, contrabassoon, to the very highs and the piccolo and the flutes, those can give you so much range in terms of the instruments. All that to say, when you're choosing instrumentation, you have to be very purposeful about what ranges or what frequencies are your instruments taking up. So I knew that in my first A section, I wanted it to be a soloist, and I had the viola in mind, but I also kept in mind where the range of this melody was. So if I just click this MIDI, you can see that the melody is sitting at around C3, C4. So it's like middle C, in Logic C3 is middle C, to the C above, basically, and a little bit higher than that. So if we have a listen, it's kind of in the, mid-range, right? And so I knew that if I just had that instrument, that's nice and all. It's a nice melody, but I did want some sort of background support. So I didn't want anything to step on top of the melody in terms of sitting above it in terms of the range, because it's kind of just establishing things, and I want there to be some low end support. So that's why I brought in the piano. And now you can see this is what this looks like. These chords here on the bottom, those are all the piano chords, but they're giving the viola room at the top. Sorry, they're giving the viola room at the top to sit on top of, right? So if we have a listen, you can see the mid-range getting into the highs is covered by the viola, but then the low mids are also covered by the piano through the chords. So yes, there are a couple notes that are overlapping in terms of the viola and piano, but they're very different timbres as well, so it doesn't really matter. And then after this, but see, you also notice if I kind of squish this down, the very, very highs and the very, very lows aren't being covered yet. And that's very purposeful because I wanted this to be a more intimate moment, and I only wanted to feature these two instruments in a more close range. But it feels balanced because, again, the mid highs and the lower mids are also being covered by just these two instruments. So when we expand into the fuller orchestra, if I just maybe highlight all the MIDI here, and we take a look, let's take a look at the frequencies that they're covering here. So this is C5, C6. And you can see these notes are definitely higher than the ones we just saw in the viola, solo viola. And all the way down here, let's see, these are like C1. So it's like all the way at the bottom of the keyboard. Now, because the tutti orchestra comes in, all these different instruments are taking up room in different areas of the frequency spectrum. And you see there are really no holes, no big gaps anywhere in this arrangement, which is a big reason why it sounds full and rich. Because I kept on listening and I said, are there any frequency holes? Like, are there any gaps in any of the areas in the highs, the mids, the lows that are being neglected right now? And if there are any holes, I need to fill it in with something, because in the context of this piece, it's more of a love romance piece. I want it to feel more comforting and full. So all the frequencies have to be taken care of. So when we go from, let's just go from the end of the A section, going into, yeah, maybe let's see the MIDI again. See, everything is now expanding in terms of range. Violin soar higher right there, the octave higher than the viola in the first half. Piano is still playing down here in the mid-range. But now we have low instruments like the double basses, the woodwinds as well. Coming in a little bit closer, and now they expand outwards again. And this also brings to mind the harmonic series. So essentially, the lower you go, the easier it is for instruments to get muddy when they are in closer intervals with each other. So the lower you go, the wider apart you want intervals between instruments to be. That's why you see such a big gap here between like the, I think this is maybe even the sub bass, or it's definitely like one of those low instruments, like a double bass or something. And then there's a big gap here, like over an octave, almost 2 octaves between that and the next higher instrument. And then near the top, you can have closer intervals because those frequencies don't clash as much. So the main idea is asking yourself that question: are there any holes? Does it feel like any area of my frequency spectrum is missing? Because sparser arrangements, ones that have fewer instruments, require more balance, more necessary balance to fill in those different areas. If you just have a piece where the highs are being filled in with, like, let's say really high strings, and then you have a really low tuba, you can imagine the middle range doesn't really have anything. And that really feels like there's a big extreme range there, but there's nothing to fill in the gap in between. And that's what you want to be aware of as well. So looking at it visually in terms of looking at your MIDI, seeing if there are any holes, but also closing your eyes and just listening and asking yourself that question: are there any holes? And at the point where where your answer is no, then you know your arrangement is then complete. Because if you add in addition to that, unless you're like doubling a texture, like you're doubling a melody with a different instrument to make that texture thicker or something, but if you just add more and more lines just for the sake of adding things in, that's what starts to lead to overwhelm, and then you don't know where to go back, and then you have to start muting stuff and deleting stuff, and that's never a fun thing to do anyway. So to avoid that, always just ask yourself that question, and you'll be good to go. Okay. I know this from personal experience. I know this from helping my students. And if they ask us this question all the time, I know this would also help them too. And I hope it's helped you as well. So hopefully that kind of makes sense. Let me know if you have any questions below. Again, if you want to check out that free on-demand workshop called the Complete Composer's Framework to learn how to go from your initial idea all the way to the polished master and have that step-by-step framework, I want to give that to you completely free. Just click the first link down below and you'll learn a ton of valuable stuff from it. I'll share with you tons and tons of tips and tricks to really bring your music to the next level. Again, plus my virtual orchestration roadmap, which is something I follow every single time when I work on my mockups. You'll receive it absolutely free when you check it out down below. And I want to give it to you as a thank you for watching this video today. So I'll see you in the next one. Thanks again, and I'll catch you very, very soon. Take care. Bye-bye.